The first question that we have for the panel today is about the death of the journalistic business model and how clickbait, PR, and different models of ownership are influencing the media landscape. And first of all, Marton, I'd like to hand over to you. If you could tell us about Telex, about your funding model, and how it's influencing, how you've been influenced by media ownership models.
Yes, hello, thank you for the invitation. As Judith mentioned, Telex.hu, more than 1.5 years ago, we quit from the Hungary's biggest news site because there was a bit of political pressure and some changes in the board. Some pro-government people came in, so all the 90 of us quit and decided to start our own news site, our own business. This is now Telex. We received, we had nothing, we had no money, we had nothing, we had no office, we had no computers, we had basically nothing. And we asked for the audience, for the readers to help our start, and they gave about 1 million euros in a few days. So we had a comfortable start. And we are living from that money. We collect money from our readers, and we have advertisement revenues as well. It's half and a half, and our goal is to be independent, to not have any kind of influential money. We want to be dependent on the readers and the supporters and the money that they give us.
So what's different? What's different between this and a subscription model?
Well, with the subscription model, you have a paywall, you have a wall, and you can read the news behind the wall if you pay. In our model, you can read anything. There's no wall. Every news, every content is accessible.
And you say that you're 50-50 advertising funding. So are you tempted to give your stories sexier headlines? And I don't ask that as a criticism. It's something media outlets have done forever to catch viewers. But are you susceptible to clickbait?
We are happy if we have more readers, but we don't state lies. We don't headline anything that is not in the article. So we don't do clickbait just to get more clicks.
Very good, very impressive. And one other trouble that I've heard many journalists talk about is PR, where you're given press releases and some outlets regurgitate them wholesale and don't check their facts. And how do you, is there a tension between time? Oh, I'm sorry, that's not supposed to go off. It's supposed to be silent. How does that affect you? Do you have the time in this funding model to check all of those facts that are presented to you?
Yeah, we try to. There's a different team who handles PR articles and paid articles, and but there's some connection between the editorial and this team. So before these kind of articles appear on the site, we know about them. We can check them if we want to, and there has been never a problem with this kind of thing that someone pays for an article which is full of untrue statements.
Excellent. Well done. Thank you. And thank you for keeping standards up. Now I'm going to turn to Marcus. Marcus, why is diversity important when it comes to the ownership and control of media outlets?
Diversity is important because it comes down to fundamental democratic principles of freedom of speech. You can't have freedom of speech if certain sections of your society do not have access to the media. You know, it's one thing being able to speak, but if we're speaking into a vacuum, then that's not freedom of speech. And so what you need to look at is who actually then controls the media outlets which people can actually access and promote their voices. And what you find is that there's an oligopsony in the UK when it comes to, and an oligopoly on both sides. So you have a remarkably few number of people and companies and organizations. And that's a market distortion, and that causes massive problems. Now, thankfully, I've been campaigning about this and talking about this for a long time, and people are starting to recognize that. So ITV, which is the largest commercial broadcaster, public service broadcaster in the UK, has just created a new funding model. So it's ring-fenced money. So looking at who owns the company, seeing if it is owned by women, if it's owned a certain number of ethnic minorities in the C-suite, a certain number of disabled people in the C-suite, they will ring-fence money for those companies as well to make sure those voices are being heard, not just in terms of the staff, but who actually runs the companies. And similar things are being done with regards to Channel 4, another public service broadcaster, and we're currently talking to the BBC about the criteria that they use.
And recently you had a meeting with the BBC head of news, which was publicised quite widely. Were you discussing this, or were you discussing something else?
I was discussing, it was with the Director General. It wasn't with the head of news.
Beg your pardon.
That's okay. So the story that came out is that I was tentatively appointed, supposedly for a senior current affairs position at the BBC, and allegedly the Director General of the BBC then blocked my appointment because he said that I'd campaigned too much on diversity, trying to increase diversity. The discussion was not about me when I met him, and I've got another meeting with the head of editorial policy on Monday, in fact, to progress this issue. It's really, the BBC says that it is an anti-racist organisation and an anti-sexist organisation. However, the issue is, if you look at, talking about UK legislation, if you look at the Equality Act of 2010, which looks at protected characteristics, that's women, disabilities, etc., etc. Don't worry, I'll be fast.
No,
right?
I'm really sorry, it's still doing it.
You need to, it's not just enough to employ people from these protected characteristics. They need to actually be able to live those protected characteristics. So how do you actually live those protected characteristics? You know, if you are religious, if you're a Catholic, but you're not allowed to go to church because you're then seen as being biased if you attend church, that's not really allowing yourself to be Catholic or Protestant or Muslim or whatever religion you might be. And so what I'm arguing is that the BBC hasn't really incorporated the Equality Act of 2010 as to how do people live their protected characteristics, right, without it being viewed as bias. So a real basic one of that is Reclaim the Night. Do people know Reclaim the Night? You know, or Reclaim the Street. It's women being able to go out at night time, right? Is this a campaigning issue, which then forces them not to be impartial when they are reporting? Or is it an issue where a woman is expressing her gender when she goes on one of those protests, because it's fundamental to her womanhood to be able to walk the streets at night, right? And so it's not enough to say I'm anti-sexist. How do you allow women to actually live their gender? How do you allow disabled people to live their disability?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And Katalin. So, Katalin is an MEP here in the European Parliament, but more recently, you were part of the team standing for election in Hungary in the general election. So, what happened there in terms of state media control? What are you seeing in Hungary in terms of the state media?
Hello and welcome. How much time do I have for this question? Because, I don't know, I have to leave Brussels tomorrow in the evening, and I would be very, very happy to talk about this issue until then. But Okay, let me start with some questions. So as Judith said, we just had elections. Do you know, or could you guess how many televised debates happened before a general election between the opposition candidate and the sitting prime minister on the TV? Exactly 0. Did you know what? When was the last time Prime Minister Orban has debated anybody on live television? 2006. Maybe some of them weren't alive then. Or do you know how much time the opposition candidate received on the public broadcaster to present his program? How many times he was invited there to speak in a live session? Yeah, Hungarian. Yeah, okay. Colleague back then says the correct answer. 1 time. He was invited 1 time, and he received exactly 5 minutes of airtime. 5 minutes. And in the very same day, Mr. Orban's grand speech for a big rally was repeated 9 times. And last closing question. Do you know which media outlet allowed so-called experts in their big primetime television show who spoke about Ukraine not being a real country and President Zelensky being a drugged-up Nazi? Was it Russia Today or the Hungarian public broadcaster? Well, the answer is both. So, like, in a nutshell, this is the situation of the Hungarian public broadcaster. We heard very interesting insights about how diversity matters when it comes to ownership structures, how much control over the channels can influence not only the content of the media, but also on the general state of democracy, on public discourse. And I have to tell you, dear friends, that currently the state of affairs in Hungary do not resemble a European Union country's public media broadcaster. The state has established a total monopoly over messaging and spending and control of the media. The free media space has been shrinking dramatically over the past years. Marton is a better person than me to tell you about this because he was actually a victim of being employed by a free and independent broadcaster and was pushed out. But the situation has been deteriorating extremely rapidly. The entire election campaign was characterized by fake news, lies, and shameless campaigns of the brutest way of expressing politics. Of course, campaigns are never nice, but you cannot imagine how broadly did the Hungarian state, the Hungarian government use their own publicity channels, the media that they own, the public broadcaster that actually financed by our taxpayers' money to spread lies in the campaign about the opposition. Lies such as the opposition would like to send Hungarian youth to war in Ukraine. Lies about the opposition candidate wanting to cut pensions and privatize hospitals and all that. And it didn't happen on the official campaign channels, didn't happen from the campaigning budget of the government party, but it happened on the public broadcaster, it happened on government advertisement barriers, extremely distorting the media landscape. And just a closing thought here, because I told you I could talk a lot about. This could be vile and difficult just by itself. But if we combine it with the methods that were used in the past 12 years of the supermajority government of Mr. Orban, where he meticulously killed off independent voices, or either captured independent broadcasters and filled their board up with their own people, or just like plainly closed them down, such as they closed down the print newspaper called Népszabadság, which is basically was kind of like if somebody just decides to close the Times from one day to another, and propped up fake news propaganda websites with advertisement money to a great extent. Most Hungarians living on the countryside who do not pay for a cable service can only access either the public broadcaster or with one exception, private channels that are very closely aligned to the government message.
10 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the state we have to conduct politics in, and this is the state where outlets such as Telex try to bring out the voice of truth and the voice of the independent media. It is difficult.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. And that's what we're all worried about. That's what we're fighting through all of these sessions. So, thinking about the emotional side of social media, good and bad, what I want to ask is there space for investigative journalism anymore? And where does censorship come into all of this? So, Marcus, I want to start with you this time. The first piece of yours that I ever read was about Twitter's own censorship panel and a mistake that it made. So could you tell us about that and then talk about social media?
Yeah, so Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, they actually publish their ethnic diversity figures. They're American. Americans don't really care about disability as much, so they publish their gender figures as well of their employees. They also publish their gender and their ethnicity figures when it comes to who is writing the algorithm, so the technical side and the non-technical side. What they do not publish is that they have content moderators, and they have boards who decide who those what should be the guidelines of the content moderators. And they don't publish the ethnicity or the gender or any of the protected characteristics of the people who sit on those boards. It is thought that they are disproportionately male and disproportionately white, right? This has consequences. So, for example, on Facebook, they confused hashtag Al-Aqsa, which is a mosque, with a terrorist group. And so any posts which had Al-Aqsa in it were either deleted or they were downgraded. This was then discovered and said, oh, it's a human error mistake. Right? Similarly,